Hi, folks. How are you? Hi, Dolores. Hi, Kay. Hi, Dale. We have a few others who have joined us, but I'm not seeing them yet. I'm seeing the number in my interface. But so far, I see only Dale and Kay and Dolores. So, anyway, to the rest of you, hello. Hello. There's Deborah Wilson. Hey, Deborah, how are you? Nice to see you. Okay, so it's Medicare for all time. What I want to talk about now is the politics, okay, of Medicare for all tonight. So let me start off with a Twitter experience I had around the latter part of December and the first part, of January. During the run-up to the vote for Speaker on January 3rd, some Twitter influentials with sizable followings came together around the idea that a small group of the progressives in Congress, centered around the squad, had enough votes to block Nancy Pelosi's re-election as Speaker if they stood together and voted as a bloc. The influentials then self-organized along with others to carry out a campaign to pressure the congressman to bargain with Pelosi in return for their votes. The influentials demanded that the congressman set a floor vote for Medicare for all as the price of their support. The ensuing Twitter campaign used the hashtags hashtag Medicare for all with the 4 in the middle and hashtag forced to vote. Some of you remember, I'm sure, Jimmy Dore was involved in that. Also Brianna Joy Gray, Ryan Knight. There were a number of people with very large followings who were connected to that campaign. It was not successful in its objective of, quote, forcing the vote, unquote. But it created quite a bit of anger and widened a developing wedge between the progressives, quote unquote, in Congress and the progressives, quote unquote, on Twitter. Accusations of, quote, selling out, unquote, flowed from some of the Twitter influentials, and counter accusations of, quote, about naivete, unquote, and, quote, you don't understand our plan to pass Medicare for all and the real costs of giving Pelosi an ultimatum, unquote, flowed from certain congressmen to the Twitter influentials. The widened gap between the progressive congressmen and those on Twitter who considered themselves part of the movement remains. Those who originated the Force the Vote campaign think they've done the right thing and that the congressmen they look to for change in the system are being or have been corrupted. And for their part, the congressmen involved are developing higher levels of mistrust of some of the movement people, presaging difficulties in the future in getting movement support when that is necessary to influence struggles over policy. Parallel to hashtag Force the Vote, there was another Twitter campaign which also attempted to gain attention. And full disclosure, I was involved in that campaign. Alana Dell was also involved in that campaign. And a number of other people who are very closely allied with us. And some of them, in terms of their sheer weight, on Twitter, were very, very helpful in getting this campaign, at least to get a little bit of attention. But we were drowned out by the greater Twitter visibility of the Force the Vote influentials. But what our campaign was about was that it called on the Squad and other progressives to simply block Nancy Pelosi until she recognized that she could not win the speakership, withdrew her candidacy, and supported the idea of possible successors who could get support from the whole spectrum of people in the Democratic caucus. They replace Pelosi January 3rd and then Force the Vote group. However, us, that is also unsuccessful in persuading progressives in Congress to oppose Pelosi. So both groups failed. But I think it's worth pointing out the differences between the rationale of the Replace Pelosi group and that of the group whose objective was to get a floor vote for Medicare for All. The Force the Vote group was seeking a floor vote, not so much to win. They really didn't think they were going to win, but to find out basically who was with us and who was against us, which reps would take a stand for Medicare for All and which would not. They assumed that withholding votes from Nancy Pelosi would force her to agree to hold such a vote, and if she agreed, to hold to her agreement, so we could get people on record as for or against, which then would lead to a situation where we could use ads to go after certain people, primary them, get more progressives into Congress, and create a better situation for Medicare for All in the future. That was the logic of what they were calling for, what the Force the Vote campaign was calling for. The Force the Vote group also assumed, I think, that the payback that Nancy Pelosi would exact from the Squad and others would not be so great that it outweighed what they would gain from such a floor vote. I also think the Replace Pelosi group assumed that withholding the group would force Pelosi to end her candidacy for Speaker once it was clear that she could not win. And we also thought if she withdrew, that the Squad and the other progressives would be able to help to elect a speaker more friendly to their priorities, such as floor votes, not just for Medicare for All, but for the Green New Deal, for minimum wage increases, for a job guarantee, for a basic income, not a universal basic income, we might add, a basic income for those who needed it. Paid family leave, student debt elimination. 2, key committee assignments for Squad members, and others. And 3, rules changes such as the elimination of pay-go rules and rules making it easier to get floor votes for other progressive bills. For example, Medicare for All, of course, but also for the ABC Act, which is the Act for a Basic Income that had been introduced by Jayapal and Rashida Tlaib, and which also contained within it, a provision to, quote, pay for, unquote, things by minting platinum coins, thus doing something great for advancing the MMT narrative. We were interested in that. So the Replace Pelosi group had a broader set of goals than the Force the Vote group, outlining more rewards for the squad and other progressives, and in my view, therefore had a better chance of persuading the squad and others to take the risk of blocking Pelosi, other things being equal. However, things were not equal. The Force the Vote group had many Twitter celebrities backing its efforts, while the Replace Pelosi group had none. Also, the Force the Vote group got going first, and its leaders were unwilling to entertain changes to their message as January 3rd approached. So, what are the morals that can be drawn from this story? We really want to draw some morals from this because we put a lot of work in on it. The Force the Vote people put a lot of work in on it. And the Replace Pelosi group also put a lot of work in on it. And there are morals to be drawn for campaigns like this, but also for Medicare for All. So first, if you want to influence what will happen in Congress using Twitter, you need a campaign where the risk for Congress people in doing what you ask is clearly outweighed by the rewards for them. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about the personal rewards for them. What I'm saying is that even assuming that they view the rewards for them from the standpoint of what is good for their constituencies and for the country rather than themselves. I'm not making the assumption that these Congress people were all concerned about what's in it for me from a selfish point of view. Rather, from their point of view, the what's in it for me probably meant what was good for their constituencies and for the country, at large. Second, you need the Twitter celebrities, quote unquote, whose followings are large enough for Congress people to take notice, because otherwise you just get drowned out, as we were. Third, your ask, quote unquote, of the Congress people must be consistent with campaign plans they already have or are formulating to try to pass laws of the kind your campaign is designed to advance. That is, if what you're asking them to do seems likely to them to have a negative impact on plans they're already formulating or have formulated, then they're not likely to have an open mind to what you want them to do. So looking at the Force the Vote strategy in the context of plans formulated in the Congressional Progressive Caucus to advance Medicare for All, Force the Vote seemed like a loser from the point of view of the squad and other members of the caucus. Why? Why did it seem like a loser? One, it required them to take actions that would have allowed Pelosi, who they do not trust, to fail to follow through on a commitment she made to them with a figurative, quote, knife at her throat, unquote, which is what a threat but to vote against her for Speaker would have been. It would have been a knife at her throat. Okay, and if you're willing to do that to a hostage, and you're about to elect the hostage to have power over you, that is not a smart thing to do. Because if you're going to put a knife to the throat of the queen, you had better, figuratively speaking, of course, cut off her head. Would she have followed through with the commitment she had made under duress? I don't think so. She would have taken pleasure in finding ways to get out of it. But two, since the chances of getting a floor vote and the advantages it might bring were uncertain, the risks involved in trying to place her under extreme duress loomed large in comparison to the likelihood of a reward, which is not that large compared to the rewards that might be available from their own plans. On the other hand, the Replace Pelosi campaign also didn't have that kind of organization power and reach behind it. So was it any better in that respect than Force the Vote? Well, certainly not better from the standpoint of its ability to succeed, especially in the presence of the Force the Vote campaign that was drowning it out. But still, it was better in the following way, because its immediate goal was about replacing Pelosi with someone the left could trust to work with them on floor votes, rules changes, and better committee assignments for squad members. Having such a person as Speaker would have been consistent with any Medicare for All plans formulated or being formulated by the CPC, the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Specifically, Pramila Jayapal had and has a strategy for pushing Medicare for All. We are seeing that strategy unfold right now. Also, a move to replace Pelosi with someone more friendly would not have undermined that strategy and the rollout of the new Medicare for All bill. It would not have undermined the plans to build up support for the bill to a crescendo this year and next. Indeed, it would only have fed into that strategy provided the CPC also negotiated getting the Medicare floor vote according to its own schedule, rather than according to the Speaker's schedule. If the CPC could have traded its support not only for the floor vote, but for the floor vote at a time convenient to it, then it would have accomplished a lot. So in contrast to a situation where an unfriendly Pelosi would have almost certainly manipulated her floor vote commitment to ensure its failure, and also a poor showing, perhaps discrediting Medicare for all, the Congressional Progressive Caucus could have had a more friendly speaker to have that key vote at a time of their choosing, when support for Medicare for all would be strongest. Which brings us to the present. What is happening with Medicare for all now? Well, a movement to raise support for Medicare for all to a fever pitch is being methodically organized and expanded by the CPC under the leadership of Jayapal and hundreds of independent groups coming together from the bottom up to work in tandem to produce an electoral coalition to pressure office holders and candidates, CD by CD, that is congressional district by congressional district, state by state, community by community, to co-sponsor, eventually support, and compel passage of Medicare for all in the Congress. Some of the members of the coalition were on display at the reintroduction announcement of the Medicare for All bill, now numbered H.R. 1976, by the way, on March 17th, 2021. Others have appeared at protests, countless Zoom calls, podcasts, and discussions on the web. Still others are visible through their CD by CD organizing campaigns. Let us now look let me share the screen here. So let us now look at a news release by Jayapal from March 17th, when she and Debbie Dingell introduced the Medicare for All Act of 2021 alongside more than half of the House Democratic Caucus after millions lose health care during a pandemic. So, of course, this was in Washington, okay, the news release. And it reads, today, Pramila Jayapal, Washington 07, and Debbie Dingell, Michigan 12, Congressional District, introduced the Medicare for All Act of 2021. Transformative legislation that would guarantee health care to everyone in America as a human right at a moment in which nearly 100 million people are uninsured or underinsured but during a pandemic. Endorsed by 300 local, state, and national organizations. 300 local, state, and national organizations. And co-sponsored by more than half of the House Democratic Caucus, including 14 committee chairs and key leadership members. The landmark bill provides comprehensive benefits to all, with no copays, private insurance premiums, deductibles, or other cost sharing. The Medicare for All Act of 2021 is being introduced in the House of Representatives 1 year to the day the COVID-19 virus was first confirmed in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. This devastating health crisis, which has taken the lives of more than 540,000 Americans, I believe right now it's more than 570,000, is only underscored how the country's current healthcare system leaves millions behind. As unemployment skyrocketed to historical levels during the pandemic, millions of additional families lost their health care, and the country experienced the highest increase in the number of uninsured Americans ever recorded. So let's get some more of the flavor, okay, of what the release has to say. Once again, the Medicare for All Act of 2021 is also endorsed by, I missed something important in the paragraph before. The growing movement for universal single-payer health care has robust support inside and outside of Congress. The Medicare for All Act of 2021 has several new co-sponsors, including the chair of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, the Frank Pallone Jr. of New Jersey, who just committed to a hearing on Medicare for All. Last Congress, the legislation had 4 historic hearings. The first ever on Medicare for All in the House Committee on Rules, the House Committee on Ways and Means, the House Committee on the Budget, and the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. M4A is supported by 69% of registered voters, including 87% of Democrats, say Jayapal and Dingell. The majority of independents, actually I believe it was 60% of independents, and nearly half of the Republicans, I think that figure was, 65% of independents, I think, and nearly half of Republicans, about 47%. Additionally, over 50 cities and towns across America have passed the resolutions endorsing Medicare for All. It was also endorsed by 300 local, state, and national organizations that represent nurses, doctors, business owners, unions, and racial justice organizations. This includes Physicians for a National Health Program, Public Citizen, National Nurses United, the Center for Popular Democracy, People's Action, Social Security Works, Labor Campaign for Single Payer, the SEIU, the Services Employees International Union, and hundreds more. For a list of endorsing organizations, there's a link. But what I'm going to do for you is shift away from this for a second and go over here to the video of the introduction of the Medicare for All Act. And you can watch slowly. Let me share that. And you can watch as the credits roll by here just before the real start of the video. Let me get that for you. Here we go. Let me start up the video. I'll skip the sound, it's distracting. But you can see the organizations roll by. It's a very impressive list. Here are the state organizations. just hundreds of local groups, all organized to support the introduction of this act and to support the campaign. Here are the local groups here now. An awful lot of organization has gone into this. Much more powerful organization than goes into a Twitter campaign representing real support in local areas to get people organized. And here come the co-sponsors, okay, in Congress. By the way, some of the leadership in Congress is here. Don't know if they can be trusted, but Hakeem Jeffries is here. Catherine Clark, the assistant speaker, okay, is here. Hakeem Jeffries, of course, is the heir apparent to Speaker Pelosi if she has her way. Here are the organizations again, in case you missed a few of them at the national level. So there we go. I'll stop sharing this now, but what I wanted to do was to give you the flavor of how impressive this list of endorsees is. It was an impressive effort to get all these organizations together, okay, and organized. The rest of the news release, okay, from Jayapal, quotes from the video introduction. If you want to follow this down further, then you can either go to the rest of the news release, okay, or go to the video and hear the people say what they have to say. They're quoted, okay, in the news release. Just person after person stating their strong support, okay, for Medicare for all. And of course, you have the list of congressmen who have signed on to the bill. And there's a link to the text of the legislation as well, okay, in the news release. Okay, but you can also look up the bill by going to congress.gov and searching for HR 1976. So I'll stop sharing that now. But the CD by CD organizing campaign is illustrated well by what the National Nurses United are doing, okay, the NNU. And that is described in a piece from Medium, which I'm going to bring up now. I'm going to share with you. It's worth going through that piece because it's pretty concrete. It's pretty practical. Okay. So here we go. This was actually done on March 25th. What's next in the fight for Medicare for All? The author of this is the Nurses Campaign, for Medicare for All. The dire and urgent need for Medicare for All in the U.S. is more clear now than ever before. Over a year into the pandemic, we have seen just how broken our healthcare system is at a time when we need it to be working best. For nurses, the fight has become personal. Nurses have long fought for Medicare for All on behalf of their patients and communities. But in the pandemic, an unsettling truth has come to light. For too many hospital corporations, nurses are seen as expendable. Nurses can't get the personal protective equipment, PPE, needed to keep themselves and their patients safe because hospitals continue to refuse to keep enough on hand. This was as of March 25th, 2021. All in the name of keeping costs low and profits high. The hospital corporations are still emphasizing these huge profits in the middle of the pandemic. I want you to remember that and note that. As a result, going on with the piece, as a result, over 300 registered nurses have died from COVID-19. Deaths that were largely preventable. Simply put, even in a pandemic, profit is valued over nurses and patients' lives. And it's not just the hospitals, say the nurses. During a global pandemic, you'd think health insurance corporations might be spending more and making less. But you'd be wrong. In fact, United Health Group had its most profitable quarter of all time last year. The CEOs of Cigna and Centene made $79 million, 6 times higher than the year before, and $59 million, 1.5 times higher than the year before, respectively, last year. That is in 2020. This was happening at a time when an estimated 27 million people in the U.S. were kicked off their employer-sponsored health insurance last year. When we needed people to be able to see a healthcare provider the most, that is from the public point of view, when we, the public, needed people to be able to see a healthcare provider the most so we could limit the spread of the pandemic. Tens of millions could not, say the nurses. And let's remember, this is on top of 29 million people who had no insurance and 41 million people who were underinsured before the pandemic. Now, I deny that 29 people had no insurance. By my estimates, 33 million people at least had no insurance before the pandemic, because when Obama left, 30 million people had no insurance, and Trump, through various ways, and the Republicans whittled down further or drove up further the number of people who had no insurance. So it was certainly between 33 and 37 million by the time Trump left office. I shouldn't say that. By the time the pandemic started during Trump's term. I'll take the 27 million estimated people kicked off their employer-sponsored health insurance as maybe an accurate figure. But by my count, that still leaves 60 million people who had no insurance and 41 million people who were underinsured before the pandemic. That's 101 million people not able to see doctors when they needed to see them for the pandemic. Going on with what the nurses had to say. What's more, the pandemic has exposed deep racial health disparities that have existed for decades. Black, Latinx, and indigenous people are 3 times as likely to contract COVID-19 and twice as likely to die from it. Why is this the case? Systemic racism perpetuates in many different forms in our country, and one of the primary forms is our broken healthcare system. Communities of color are, on average, less likely to have health insurance, to see a doctor regularly, and receive preventative care than their white counterparts. As a result, we see disproportionate poor health outcomes and pre-existing conditions among people of color. We know, and this is their emphasis, not mine, if we'd had a Medicare for all system in the U.S. that guarantees health care to all people free at the point of service, the pandemic would have played out a lot differently for millions, of families. That, is very true. It's been estimated already by some that 100,000 or more lives were lost because people did not have Medicare for all. That's just apart from the mismanagement of Trump. The good news is we're fighting harder than ever for it, say the nurses. Over the past few years, our nurse-led, grassroots-powered campaign, made up of all kinds of people, not just nurses, has been taken to a new level. Our fight isn't slowing down in 2021. In fact, it's more urgent than ever before, and we need your help. So let's talk about the path to win, what lies ahead for the rest of the year, and how you can get involved no matter who you are or where you live in the country. First, let's recap what just happened last Wednesday, that is on the 17th, in case you missed it. Activists and organizers across the country have been working for months to help confirm their members as original co-sponsors in the lead up to the highly anticipated reintroduction of the Medicare for All Act in Congress by author Representative Pramila Jayapal. Organizing took place in hundreds of districts collectively, with volunteers all over the country calling, emailing, and meeting with their representatives to ask them to sign on to the bill. That work paid off. We saw the Medicare for All Act of 2021, H.R. 1976, introduced last Wednesday with the record 112 co-sponsors, now at 114. That's more than half of all the Democrats in the House, which is huge. Because of our collective work, this bill includes influential co-sponsors like Rules Committee Chairman McGovern and Budget Committee Chairman Yarmuth. But also representatives who have never signed on before, like Tony Cardenas, California, and Ted Deutsch, are now original co-sponsors because of years of organizing in their districts. Even the chair of the powerful House Energy and Commerce Committee, Frank Pallone, has now signed on as an original co-sponsor and has agreed to hold a hearing in his committee this year. This happened through our movement's work and organizing. It's clear that this grassroots organizing is working, that this is the work our movement must continue to do. 114 co-sponsors is great, but it's not enough support to win. If Medicare for All were given a floor vote in the House tomorrow, we'd lose. That means our job as a movement is to keep organizing locally, district by district, to pressure more members of Congress, particularly the Democrats who still don't support Medicare for all, and most importantly, the ones who sit on key committees. Now, I do want to point up the importance of this. It is not so much that the whole Democratic Party in Congress is against Medicare for all. No, that is not true. More than half of them are for Medicare for all, and there might be even more than the co-sponsors who are for Medicare for all, but who won't say so because the leadership of the Congress, most of the leadership team, specifically Nancy Pelosi, Jim Clyburn, Steny Hoyer, they are against Medicare for all and have been against Medicare for all for years. And many key committee people have been against Medicare for all. So, one of the things that we have to do, which really is emphasized here, even though they don't directly say so, this is what is being emphasized by the nurses. We need to have the leadership converted, or perhaps this is implied. We need to have the leadership replaced. But going forward with the article, to advance vote in the House, H.R. 1976 needs to have hearings, markups, and votes in the powerful Energy and Commerce and Ways and Means committees, as well as the Budget, Rules, Armed Services, Oversight, and Education and Labor committees. So remember, even if the chairperson of the Energy and Commerce Committee is now a co-sponsor and may even mean what he says with respect to Medicare for all, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, specifically Richie Neal, is not on board yet. And if the Ways and Means Committee is not on board, we got problems getting it to the floor of Congress. If Ways and Means is not on board, if Nancy Pelosi is not on board, if Hoyer and Clyburn are not on board, it's never going to get a floor vote. Not unless it's possible for progressives to play hardball. And I'll talk about that later, going on with the article. As well as the Budget, Rules, Armed Services, Oversight, and Education and Labor committees. We need the chairs and members of those committees to at least feel enough pressure that they know they must not stand in our way, and at best even come over and join our side as active advocates. That's what the nurses are for. That's what the other major groups in back of Medicare for all are trying to accomplish. They're not trying to get some huge, overpowering Twitter following to sweep all with its fantastic influence on Congress. That's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to do the hard work of getting the chairs and members of the legislature to either not stand in the way or at best come over. Going forward, we also need to continue to mobilize together at key moments However, the COVID-19 pandemic allows us to do. Hopefully, these barriers will begin to recede now if the vaccines work as well. So far, so good. The vaccines appear to be working, even against the South African strain, even against the UK strain. Don't know yet about the Brazilian strain. Going forward, we have to continue to demonstrate the growing strength and size of our movement nationally through coordinated national days of action like we've had over the last several years. I think they're going to need more than that. Looking out for more calls to action like this from us. Look out for more calls to action like this from us as the year goes on. So they're telling you they're going to have calls to action. But today we're excited to share with you our plans for that district level work. Today we're publishing 2 lists of key members of Congress that will guide our work for the rest of the year. First up, we're announcing our target list of the 19 next most likely Democrats to co-sponsor Medicare for All next if they feel enough pressure from their constituents. In these districts, we'll be developing local campaigns led by volunteer leaders in the area to build and demonstrate public support and pressure their representatives to sign on. Here's that list. Zoe Lofgren of California, 19th Congressional District. John Garamendi of District 3. Catherine Castor of District 14. Catherine Castor is from Florida, District 14. Darren Soto, Florida, 9th Congressional District. Jared Golden from Maine, District 2. Bakwesi Mfumi from Maryland, District 7, former head of the NAACP. By Representative G.K. Butterfield, North Carolina, District 1. Representative Deborah Ross, North Carolina, District 2. Is constantly asking me for money, and yet she has the gall not to support Medicare for All. I'm not from that district, but she's still asking me for money. Oh, I'm so progressive, but I don't support Medicare for All. Representative Donald W. Norcross, New Jersey, District 1. Representative Albio Sierras, District 8 in New Jersey. These folks are targets. But Joyce Beatty of Ohio, District 3. Tim Ryan, Ohio, District 13. Marcy Kaptur of Ohio, District 9. Marcy Kaptur has been around for a long time, claims to be a progressive for a long time. Hasn't been there for Medicare for All. Tim Ryan has been. But this year, he's thinking about running for the Senate. He thought maybe being for Medicare for All was going to hurt him. So he hasn't signed on to the bill yet as a co-sponsor. He needs to be pressured. He needs to be shown if he signs on, it's going to help him. And Representative Dwight Evans of Pennsylvania, District 3. Madeline Dean of Pennsylvania, District 4. And Representative Mary Gay Scanlon, District 5 in Pennsylvania. And Representative Vicente Gonzalez, District 15 in Texas. And Representative Kim Schreier of Washington, District 8. What's a person from Washington doing not supporting Medicare for All? How can she remain a congressman in that very progressive state? And then there's Representative Gwen Moore, District 4. She, of the great aggressiveness towards Scott Walker in Wisconsin, in the union campaign in Wisconsin. Here she is, not supporting Medicare for All. This is a target list of people that need to be converted. 19 more people to get the list up to 133 in the House. We got to have at least 3/4 of the caucus, probably more, if we want to do certain things. We'll come to why as we go through this. If you live in one of these districts, we need your help, say the nurses. Sign up here to get plugged in. Second, we're launching our Patients Over Profits campaign that first launched last year to break the influence that the hospital, insurance, and pharma corporations have on our members of Congress. The campaign is primarily focused on the Patients Over Profits pledge. This pledge asks that politicians refuse to accept donations from the corporations that make up the corporate front group, the Partnership for America's Healthcare Future, which is spending millions of dollars to prevent any healthcare reform from moving forward. And if you go to the Patients Over Profits website, you will find a donation tracker there. Let me stop this screen for a moment and go over to the Patients Over Profits donation tracker screen. And using that donation tracker 2019-2020, you can just select your home state to start your search. And let's see, let's pick up here. Let me pick up, I've got Alabama here. I didn't mean to pick up Alabama. I meant to go to Virginia, for example, because that's my state. And it shows whether someone, is an incumbent, sitting member of Congress, has taken the pledge, Patients Over Profits pledge, has received donations from corporations funding opposition to Medicare for All, plus people who may have received donations from executives opposing Medicare for All. You can click to see the candidates page for more details. I just want to jump here to a candidate who used to be my congressman, specifically Don Beyer. So here's Don Beyer. And you go to the tracker, and there's a list of contributions and sort of a summary. He received $26,500 in flagged corporate contributions, and he received contributions exceeding $200 from employees of flagged corporations. And there's the list of the corporations and organizations that he's gotten money from. And his total is $26,500. And he's gotten money from employees at Bayer, and Magellan as well. And $26,500 is a pretty good amount to have raised from these people. Now, it's nowhere near as heavy as the amount that's been raised, say, by Nancy Pelosi, or by Richie Neal. But it is a healthy amount compared to a lot of other people. Now, what I wanted to show you is that the fact that people are taking money does not mean that they're not publicly supporting Medicare for All. Because if you go down a list of co-sponsors, of Medicare for All, then Don Beyer, who's from one of the more lefty districts in the country, in Alexandria, he is a co-sponsor. He's an original co-sponsor of the Medicare for All bill. And he is evidently for it. My current congresswoman, who is Jennifer Wexton, she has received less in flag corporate contributions by some 9,000 less, but a fair amount compared to some others. And she is one of those not co-sponsoring Medicare for All. She's not yet on the target list, which probably means that the NNU doesn't think that she is anywhere near supporting Medicare for All. So Bonnie and I have a little work to do to see if we can have some influence in changing her mind about that. What I was trying to illustrate here, of course, was the tracker, its existence, how you can use it, and also the important fact that just looking at their donations doesn't lead to the perfect conclusion that if they're getting a lot of money from the healthcare interests, that they're necessarily against Medicare for All. Some of them are still for it or still say they're for it. Now, maybe in a pinch they would switch sides, but we don't know that. We really don't. It probably depends on the level of pressure they're getting from both sides. It also could be the case that there are people who've been for Medicare for All for a long time, and the interests are trying to turn them by giving them these donations. So they basically get leverage to get a hearing and come talk to them. Something like that could be going on. Anyway, okay, I did want to show you that. And I want to go back and share that campaign post some more. So to continue, so this year we're focusing on some of the top recipients of this corporate cash in Congress. In these districts, we'll also be building out local campaigns led by volunteer leaders in the area to draw attention to how much these representatives are taking from these industries that profit off pain, misery, and illness in order to pressure them to sign the pledge. Here's that list. Patients over profits. Who is highest on that list? The chair of Ways and Means, Richie Neal of Massachusetts, the District 1, who faced a tough challenge last time from Alex Morse, who might have beaten him, except they used essentially an anti-gay campaign to get Alex Morse. I don't think that's necessarily going to be successful again in 2022. I think that Richie Neal is under pressure in his district, but I believe he is the number one congressman in contributions received from the healthcare interests. But then there's Stephanie Murphy, District 7 in Florida, Scott Peters, District 52 in California, Terry Sewell, District 7 in Alabama, Brad Schneider, who sometimes plays a progressive, District 10 in Illinois, Sherry Bustos, who, by the way, originally ran as a progressive when she first ran, and I believe it was in 2010 or 2008. She actually got a contribution from me, then quickly jumped over to the center, and now is an arch enemy of the progressives in Congress. She's in District 17. There's Ron Kind in District 3, Wisconsin. Anna Eshoo, District 18 in California, bought lock, stock, and barrel by the pharmaceuticals. Kurt Schrader, Oregon District 5. Raul Ruiz, MD, California, District 36. Anna Custer in New Hampshire, District 2. Josh Gottheimer, New Jersey, District 5. By the way, one of the 3 Democratic representatives who's trying to get the state and local tax limits removed so he can get some more dollars for the very rich people in his district. One of 3 outrageous congresspeople who currently is threatening to block the infrastructure bill unless they get some money for the billionaires and millionaires in their district. Ami Bera, California, District 7. Susan Delbani, Washington, District 1. And Mickey Sherrill, New Jersey, District 11. I think she says that she's Mikey Sherrill, but might be wrong about that. Stephen Horsford, who's Nevada District 4. Tom Holleran, Arizona District 1. Derek Kilmer, Washington District 6. Aguilar, California District 31. Lou Correa, California District 46. And Representative Rajna Krishnamurti, Illinois District 8. 19 targets there, among the biggest fundraisers from the healthcare industry, being targeted by the National Nurses United. So see what happens. If you live in one of these districts, we need your help. Sign up here to get plugged in. And if you're curious about donations these members take or want to find out more about your own rep, check out Patients Over Profits Tracker built by our friends at Healthcare Now. By the way, check out Healthcare Now as well. Okay, I'll give you the link, in just a minute. They're one of the most active groups organizing for Medicare for All as well. They're part of the coalition. To step up and get involved in any of these local campaigns, by the way, Social Security Works is up to its neck in these local campaigns. You don't need to have any special skills or prior experience, say the nurses. All you need to do is to bring your commitment, and we'll help you brainstorm how to take action, come up with a plan, and find other people in your district who will work with you. Again, to get involved, just sign up here. They give you a link. If you live elsewhere in the country, we'll still need you involved. We've always got new calls to action and ways to plug in for every person, no matter where you live. Join a campaign here to stay in the loop. If you're really ready to step up now, we're looking for volunteers, those virtual text bank parties, to help text voters in all the districts that are listed above. Sign up here to join a training call on how to host a text bank party. There is no path to victory on Medicare for All that doesn't involve organizing a powerful grassroots movement of people. In this fight, we're up against one of the wealthiest industries in human history. They'll spend every dollar they have to stop us. We must offer what they will never have, people power. When enough of us come together to demand healthcare justice, there is little that can stand in our way. And with the bill introduced, we have a new concrete list of who in Congress is with us and who isn't yet. Now, we need your help to take action in your district. We also need you to help spread this message about our strategy to augment and intensify the momentum of the movement. Please share this with friends, family, and other people you know. And if you still haven't yet, join us today to become part of a historic movement of millions of people from across the country demanding that we finally guarantee health care as a human right to all. So I'll stop sharing that now and move. So I want you also to note the Jayapal Dingell introduction of H.R. 1976 with a list of co-sponsors, endorsing organizations, and lobby groups. Okay, and the Jayapal Dingell introduction is at YouTube. I will put the link in the comments for you, so you could easily get access to it. So there it is. I wanted you to have that. Okay, I've given you the Medium link in the description. So now we come to what is happening with Medicare for All now. Well, there is a citizen's guide to the Medicare for All movement, okay, and getting Medicare for All passed. And there is a recent article that appeared, okay, in Jacobin about that. It's called "The Winning Medicare for All Would Have Massive Implications Beyond Health Care." It's by Jonathan Meikles. And he says he's giving a review of Medicare for All, A Citizen's Guide, which is by Abdul Al-Sayed, the former candidate for governor in Michigan, and Mika Johnson. It was published by Oxford University Press in 2021. And you can buy it, okay, at OUP, or you can buy it, okay, at Amazon. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this article. I will share it with you briefly, because my time is growing short, and I want to spend some time on the payoff that ends this. Of course, you know already that the bill enjoys widespread support. Medicare for All enjoys widespread support among the public, with 72% of Americans in favor of making the switch to a publicly funded national health program, says the author of this piece, Jonathan Meikles. He asks, just how long support will remain at these current levels, however, is unclear. One barrier to advocates' ability to maintain momentum are the persistent misconceptions spread about MFA by its enemies. And it gives, for instance, a poll conducted by the Kaiser Family Foundation in 2020, for example, found nearly 50% of Americans mistakenly believed they could maintain their employer-sponsored health insurance under the reform Medicare for All reform. He says that should alarm MFA supporters, since one of their main selling points to the public is that it will eliminate increasingly exorbitant private health insurance plans. Yes, we have to make sure they understand that, but that they also understand they will most probably be able to maintain their doctors under Medicare for All and their other providers under Medicare for All. It's only their insurance companies that will be going. It's vitally important that we know and clarify exactly what we are fighting for. Doctors Abdul El Sayed and Johnson understand this, which is why they packed useful information into their book, the Medicare for All, A Citizen's Guide, to help anyone who needs a better understanding of the often misunderstood on the policy in waiting. And the author says the book is a useful tool for even the most seasoned organizers looking to build the mass movement necessary to take on the medical profiteers who have prevented us from achieving national health insurance for more than a century. The biggest lesson readers ought to walk away with is this: Medicare for All is a reform with massive implications that reach far beyond health. As El Sayed told Current Affairs in 2019, why single payer is so beneficial isn't just that it would provide everybody health care. That's really important, and it should be a primary goal, but it's not the only goal, unquote. But Medicare for All has the potential to serve as a massive wealth redistribution program to middle and low-income families, a jobs creator, a promoter of unionization, a check on hospital expansion and consolidation for profit, and a way to connect other human rights struggles together. Medicare for All would put tremendous constraints on private interests that, as the history of universal social programs show, will prove difficult to dismantle because this is a universal social program. Hospitals, El Sayed and Johnson tell us, exemplify the human cost of getting the policy details wrong, as well as the way that Medicare for All's potential to improve healthcare delivery can be used by organizers to grow the movement in their states and local communities. The medical centers have become the dominant employers and economic drivers in former industrial centers of the United States, thanks to a tremendous influx of federal money. Currently, a third of all health spending goes to hospitals, but instead of using their leverage to decrease the financial burden on patients and to deliver high-quality care, for-profit and not-for-profit hospitals dominate a region, then use their market power to coerce patients and insurers into paying exorbitant prices. Giant hospital corporations, nonprofit or for-profit, are virulently opposed to Medicare for All, precisely because their ability to increase revenue through monopoly power is diametrically opposed to the interests of healthcare workers and patients. Tenet and the Hospital Corporation of America, two of the largest for-profit hospital operators in the world, understand their shared interest. So they funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars into an anti-single payer front group called Partnership for America's Healthcare Future. H.R. 676, the first national health insurance bill introduced in Congress back in 2003, called for participating for-profit hospitals to convert to not-for-profit. Unfortunately, that provision is not included in the previous House bill, H.R. 1384, or Senator Sanders' signature Medicare for All Act. That was Senate Bill Senate 1129. I don't think, I know that Bernie's new Medicare for All bill has not been introduced into the 117th Congress yet. He goes on to say, the author goes on to say, this omission will hopefully be corrected during the legislative process, as long as ravenous hospital corporations continue to rule the healthcare jungle. Whatever Medicare for All bill that Congress turns out will likely be unpalatable to patients and to healthcare workers. However, the Medicare for All Act of 2021 has maintained the use of global operating budgets as called for under H.R. 676. That may sound technical, but these are used every day to pay for our police and firefighting departments, our libraries, and other institutions that are designed to meet the universal social goals. In other words, it's getting away from fee-for-service. It's doctors on salaries. It means hospitals keeping within a budget that is given to them in collaboration with the government. Elsie and Johnson also remind us Medicare for All would give a boost to healthcare workers who are looking to unionize, since hospitals would be prohibited from using public money to bankroll the union-busting campaigns. The very groups that have linked rights in the workplace with the right to health of their patients have been nurses and healthcare unions, and most notably the NNU. So let me scroll down. Do I want to highlight anything else? I don't think so. So let me stop here with this one and move to my concluding ideas here. Okay, so I've left a link to the Jacobin article reviewing the Citizen's Guide to Healthcare for You in the description. I've left a link also to the donation tracker in the description. Here's a link to the Healthcare Now organizing site, because that is a valuable organizing site. So let me offer that to you now as well. And let me also offer the great resource site, Physicians for a National Health the program as well. And there is the PNHP, which should be a help to you as well. So now, I want to point out that hardball will have to happen to pass the Medicare for All bill. Certainly, if it's going to be passed, in this Congress, the movement the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and the outside movement is going to have to play hardball. First, of course, is continuing to build that overwhelming national movement on the ground, at the grassroots. We have to do everything we can to help with that by joining the national movement that Jayapal is allied with and that has been organizing in collaboration with all these groups and all these state level groups and all these local level groups. All of this coming together. We have to join up, okay, and we have to support it. But what we also have to do is play hardball in Congress. So this is an article by David Sirota and Andrew Perez, which appeared in Jacobin also. Title is, "The right wing of the Democratic Party is playing hardball, the left wing is not." It's a short piece. Earlier this month, progressive lawmakers refused to withhold their votes on must-pass COVID-19 stimulus legislation until the bill included a $15 an hour minimum wage. Just a few weeks later, conservative Democratic lawmakers are now threatening to withhold their votes on must-pass infrastructure legislation until the bill includes large tax cuts for the wealthy. The contrast in tactics spotlights a decisive asymmetry in congressional politics right now. The right wing of the Democratic Party is willing to play hardball on behalf of the affluent, just like the Republicans. Just like the Republicans do. They'll play hardball on behalf of the affluent, to the point of threatening to take down one of President Joe Biden's signature legislative initiatives and infrastructure and climate plan he will detail on Wednesday. Now, of course, he has detailed it. And as I said in the last a couple of live streams, it is grossly inadequate in its detail. By contrast, the left wing of the party has not yet been willing to play the same kind of hardball on behalf of the working class. That refusal ultimately helped kill a promised wage hike in the recent pandemic aid bill and could similarly imperil other progressive priorities. The tax issue revolves around federal write-offs for state and local taxes, colloquially called SALT, S-A-L-T deductions. Donald Trump's 2017 tax bill limited such deductions to $10,000. The move was perceived as a mean-spirited shot at blue states, which often have higher state and local levies to fund more robust public services. But on the merits, the policy serves to limit tax deductions primarily for higher-income households. As the Daily Poster reported back in January, congressional Democrats in states like New York and New Jersey have been pushing for a repeal of the SALT deduction caps. Biden declined to include the SALT cap repeal in the American Rescue Plan. If the SALT cap was fully repealed, nearly all, 96% of the tax benefits would flow to the top quintile of earners, and more than half of the benefits would go to the top 1% of earners, according to data from Brookings. Congress's Joint Committee on Taxation found that the majority of the benefits of a SALT cap repeal would flow to households earning more than $1 million. And there's a graphic there showing that lifting the SALT cap helps the rich the most. the top 1% gets about the 70%, it's about 55% of the benefit from this. And the next, the rest of that quintile, the top the quintile, the 80th to 99th percentile, actually gets another, what looks like 39% of the benefit. So it looks like 55 and 30 is 85, and now it looks like 94% of the benefit is going to the top quintile, okay, of the people when it comes to wealth. So that's how bad removing this completely would be. It would be very, very bad. On its face, okay, the notion of passing a massive tax cut for the wealthy, one that would reportedly cost $139 billion over 2 years, should sound wildly offensive after Democrats spent so much time over the past few months debating whether to cut off COVID-19 survival checks to individuals who earned more than $50,000 in 2019, because some conservative Democrats were allegedly concerned that cash might go to some people who don't need it. But amazingly, despite the regressivity of eliminating the SALT deductions, and even though there are progressive alternatives to fix some of the purported problems with the SALT cap, the progressive lawmakers are split on the idea of a repeal. CPC Chair Pramila Jayapal said Tuesday her caucus, quote, does not have a position, unquote, on the tax breaks, according to Aida Chavez, okay, a reporter for The Nation. Some progressives, such as New York Reps Mondaire Jones and Jamal Bowman, support the repeal in solidarity with other lawmakers in their states. But New York Representative AOC voted against repealing the SALT caps in late 2019, citing data showing that it would primarily enrich the wealthy, and she continues to oppose a repeal. Now, 3 conservative Democrats, Representatives Bill Pascrell and Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey, and New York Rep Tom Suozzi, are saying they will vote against any tax-related legislation that does not eliminate the caps, according to Washington Post reporter Jeff Stein. That's why I want the spending bill, the infrastructure spending bill, to be completely separate from the tax bill. Both could be passed under reconciliation, because you get to separate the 2 areas, okay, if you want to. You can have 2 reconciliation bills, or 3 even. One for taxes, one for spending, and one for debt. But the point being, if you had that, then these 3 Democrats would not have to vote for the tax legislation if they don't want to. They could vote with the Republicans. It wouldn't bother me a bit. All that would do would be to raise the deficit. I don't mind that. They raise the deficit, go ahead. Their position could threaten Biden's ambitious new plan to spend $2 trillion to improve the nation's roads, bridges, rail lines, and utilities. The White House intends to fund the program through new tax hikes. No, it doesn't. It can't fund the program through new tax hikes. We all know that. It thinks it will fund the program through new tax hikes, maybe. Or maybe it knows better. I haven't decided yet. Jared Bernstein knows better by now, including raising the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28% for the next 15 years. In a narrowly divided House currently split 219 to 211, those 3 Democratic votes could prove decisive. No salt, no deal, Sawosi said in a press release Tuesday. I'm not going to support any change in the tax code unless there's a restoration of the salt deduction. The cap on the salt deduction has been a body blow to New York, okay, and to middle class families in New York. That's what Suwasi says. Whatever side of the issue you may be on, one thing is clear. This trio of lawmakers is leveraging their position, demonstrating how Congress actually works. There are now 8 squad members, if you include Marie Newman and Mondaire Jones. Why don't they come together and stick together? Okay, and block. What they should do is to, first of all, is to block this particular infrastructure bill, okay, and amend it so that this next bill passed under reconciliation specifies no taxes at all. No taxes at all. And state that is the only bill they will pass, okay, on infrastructure. State also they will be happy to pass another reconciliation bill dealing with taxes after the one dealing with spending is passed. And they should ram that down the throat of the rest of the Congress and Joe Biden. They have the power. They should do it. All the press releases, tweets, cable TV appearances, and fancy Washington titles can trick the casual observer into thinking rank and file lawmakers have all sorts of levels of power, but in reality, most members of Congress have very little real-world legislative power other than their vote. The more narrowly divided the House, the more power each individual lawmaker has, because congressional leaders need their votes to pass legislation. In this situation, 3 relatively obscure, low-profile lawmakers who are not major social media brands are utilizing that power to defend the interests of the wealthy. Sure, it's grotesque, but in terms of pure power politics, they're taking a stand and seizing a spot at the negotiating table, not by merely tweeting about it or making vague promises to, quote, push, unquote, for something, but by wielding their voting power to try to force the Biden White House and the congressional leadership to deal with the issue in a bill the party sees as a necessity. This is the opposite of what congressional progressives did on the minimum wage during the debate over the American Rescue Plan. By the way, they should put the minimum wage provision back into this infrastructure spending bill, because it will have an impact on federal spending, on the budget, and it therefore can be part of such a bill. And progressive lawmakers sent a letter asking Vice President Kamala Harris to ignore the parliamentarians' advice and allow a $15 an hour minimum wage to stay in the bill. But they never drew a line in the sand and said they would be, or would even consider withholding their votes on the bill if a $15 an hour minimum wage was excluded. And because they didn't wield power in the way conservative Democrats are wielding power on salt, the Biden White House knew these progressives could be ignored, and the $15 minimum wage was eliminated from the legislation. If that wasn't bad enough, after the $15 an hour wage was killed, Jayapal gave cover to Biden by insisting after the fact that he is still committed to the wage hike, even though he didn't lift a finger to make it happen when it had its best chance under the reconciliation rules of the Senate. Last week, progressive lawmakers got a special feel-good meeting with White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain to talk about the $15 minimum wage. While he reportedly reiterated Biden's commitment to a wage hike, there's been no indication out of Washington yet that Democrats have a real plan to pass such a measure. The only hint of a plan to raise the wage so far is not encouraging. That was the article in The Intercept from Ryan Grimm, that Chuck Schumer was considering attaching the minimum wage measure. It looked like, it might be a bunch of baloney. Schumer's insisting he sees some glimmer of hope. The parliamentarian would rule differently this time, but we don't really care how the parliamentarian rules. Neither should the progressives. They got to play hardball, and they got to say, nothing passes without the minimum wage in it. Nothing passes. And by the way, they should send a message also to the Senate. Once we pass a bill in the House and it has the minimum wage in it, don't you dare take out the minimum wage. Because if you do, that bill is not getting past the House. We guarantee it. They should take the position of that guy who does the ads on Men's Warehouse. We guarantee it. Maybe that latter decision is justifiable, maybe not. But until progressives are willing to play the same kind of hardball as their conservative Democratic opponents, they should expect to continue being on the menu, not at the table. And the $15 an hour minimum wage will probably remain in limbo. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct about the hardball, too. So let's get back to the hardball. There's lots, of hardball. I talked about building that overwhelming national movement. Well, that might involve social media, including Twitter campaigns. They can certainly help. It might involve general strikes and street protests in favor of Medicare for all at certain points. I suspect it's going to have to involve changing the leadership in the House. And there, I want to talk about vacating the chair. Unless we want to wait until 2023 to pack this thing, and unless the progressives in the House are willing to hold Pelosi to her promise to get out of the chair after the current term is over, it's going to be necessary if we want to pass anything in 2021 and 2022 when it comes to Medicare for all. We're going to have to get the lady who was so against Medicare for all, as well as her leadership team, out of the leadership. Now, here's the way things work to do this in the Congress. Any member of the Congress can introduce a motion calling for the Speaker to vacate the chair. It's a technical thing, basically claiming the chair, is vacant, and calling for a vote on that. Now, before 2015, it used to be that any member of the House could offer such a motion, and that motion was privileged, which means it had to have a vote in a certain amount of time, and it could not be tabled. But in 2015, in order to protect John Boehner, who was the Speaker at the time, the rules were changed to say that the only people who would be able to introduce such a privilege motion were people in the leadership, or party caucuses or party conferences. Now, there happens to be a Democratic Party caucus, an official Democratic Party caucus called the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which is chaired by Pramila Jayapal. And since it is an official party caucus, I think that it is qualified to make a privileged vacate the chair motion in the House, whereupon Nancy Pelosi would have to bring such a motion to the floor, okay, according to the rules of the House. It would have to be considered within a limited period of time. The rules specifies that it has to be considered at a specific time after the introduction of the motion. I think it's 2 business days after or something like that. Okay, I forget, okay, exactly what the wording is, and I'm not going to pull it up right now, but it is a short time, and the basic point is that motion could not be avoided by tabling it, which would basically kill the motion. In other words, the Congressional Progressive Caucus and its chair have the power to introduce that kind of motion and to get a vote on it. And unless Nancy Pelosi got a majority of the Democratic votes, she would have to vacate the chair. Now, usually a vacating the chair motion, okay, is introduced in combination with a motion calling for the election of a new speaker. So both are introduced at roughly the same time. So Nancy Pelosi could be forced to get out of the chair within just a few days' time if the CPC was willing to play hardball. This could not be done by any backbencher alone, but it could be done by an official party caucus. So the way is open for the chair of the CPC to exert some leverage. Next, if that were done, and if there were a new election for speaker, it would be possible for the CPC to stand together and to negotiate with somebody at the center of the Democratic caucus who supports Medicare for all. It probably would not be possible for Jayapal to take over as the speaker because the conservatives in the caucus simply would come together to block her. It would have to be someone who was friendly with both the progressives and the conservatives in the caucus, someone who was thought to stand at the center of the caucus. Since identity politics is so important these days, in my view, that comes down to somebody like, I'll put up 4 names. Catherine Clark, who's now the assistant speaker, but a Medicare for All co-sponsor and a Green New Deal co-sponsor. By Rosa DeLauro, who I'm not sure, I believe she is a Medicare for All co-sponsor right now, but she's normally considered as close to Pelosi, okay, and at the center of the caucus. There's Jan Schakowsky, who's considered as a progressive, but part of the establishment, very definitely. There's Debbie Dingell, and there is Barbara Lee. That's 5, okay, I mentioned. Those people might be acceptable to everyone as people who would give everyone a fair shake. Those, I think, are all people that the Congressional Progressive Caucus could support and that would be friendly to the caucus and would work on a friendly basis with them. And I think such a speaker would not be governing tyrannically as Nancy Pelosi has. Nancy Pelosi is a little tyrant, but that's something else. But what's needed is to get her out of there. What's needed is to get a leadership team, all of whose members are in support of Medicare for all. That's necessary. We need to have the leverage to bring the bill to the floor using regular order in the House. We need a leadership team that is going to support that, including perhaps changes in key committees if certain people still insist on being stubborn. If we have the leadership team, we can neutralize Ways and Means. We can use the rules, actually, if the leadership is on our side, to bypass Ways and Means, to get a Medicare for All bill released from that committee so it can't be killed, okay, in that particular committee. How is that done? Well, it could be done by the leadership team assigning the Medicare for All bill to the committee of the whole in the House. But getting the bill released but from the Ways and Means Committee, where Richie Neal would not be able to pigeonhole it. Also, progressives are going to perhaps have to find a way to change the leadership in the Senate. I'm not sure about that. Certain committees are in progressive hands, at least in the hands of people who I think are more friendly to Medicare for All. I think Dick Durbin, the whip, is more friendly to Medicare for All. There, of course, is Bernie Sanders as the head of the Budget Committee. Ron Wyden, who's the head of the Finance Committee. There are a number of committee chairs. Sherrod Brown, also a committee chair, very friendly to Medicare for All. So we might not have to change the leadership in the Senate much. As for Chuck Schumer has a way of sailing with the winds, of tacking to the wind. We're seeing him do that a little. He's worried about a primary challenge in 2022, but he also senses the way the wind is blowing in the country. He senses that it's blowing towards the left. If a Medicare for All bill would have come out of the House, I don't know whether he would block it in the Senate. If he were to block it in the Senate, there are ways to challenge the leadership there too. And then that would have to happen. But I'm not sure Chuck Schumer would resist too hard. I mean, I think from the perspective of history, he might love to have his name, his fingerprints over the Medicare for All bill after years and years and years of feeding Wall Street. Chuck Schumer came into the Congress as a progressive years and years and years ago from a progressive district. He still has those roots somewhere. We might have to get rid of the filibuster. There are a number of reasons to get rid of the filibuster. Some of them in line with the interests of Joe Biden and the centrists. Specifically, the passage of H.R. 1, the passage of Est 1, getting D.C. in as a state, possibly Puerto Rico as a state, passing other bills that are important. It's very inconvenient to have to go to reconciliation all the time. We got to be able to get out of that. What the progressives in the House and the progressives in the Senate have to get used to doing is, like the conservatives, holding must-pass bills, quote-unquote, hostage. Our representatives in Congress must make it clear to everybody concerned that we're just as willing as the right wing to hold bills hostage if they screw around, and that compromises have to be made. Now, I'm the first to say there will probably have to be compromises, because if both sides are holding bills hostage, then both sides have to give a little. But we can't get anything if only they hold the bills hostage and we don't insist on our basic values. Holding the first reconciliation bill hostage for the sake of the minimum wage legislation, that was a question of basic values, and the progressives should have held to those. They should be teaching the others. They will not give way on basic values. It's a question of each one teach one. Each bill is an opportunity to teach the right. But they're not the only ones who can hold bills hostage. But once again, social media campaigns can help to stiffen the backs, of the progressives, and should help, but in line with what the progressives are trying to do with plans of their own. We cannot subordinate ongoing plans of people who are trying to get the Medicare for All bill passed with our own notions, such as, let's see who's really against us and who's really for us. I mean, that particular notion might have been an idea which the Twitter celebrities thought was more important at this point, than anything else. But the progressives in the Congress begged to differ. They thought what was more important than anything else was going ahead with the plans of getting the Medicare for All bill introduced in Congress and getting the coalition formed to push it and push it and push it and build that overwhelming national movement. And I submit to you that maybe the progressives in the Congress were right about that. And maybe some of the backers of the Force the Vote campaign were wrong about the overriding importance of getting people on the record right now about whether they were for us or against us. Because people are for Medicare, okay, or against Medicare for all based on various circumstances. They had no MFA campaign going at that time. It wasn't in their plan to have it going at that time. They had to readjust from the campaign in the 116th Congress. They were planning. The time of the election of the new speaker was no time to do something to push Medicare for all forward. It was a time to push a speaker candidate forward who in general would be accommodating the progressives on a whole range of issues, Medicare for all included. But no, the Twitter celebrities decided to impose their own sense of the priorities in that particular situation. And to denigrate as sellouts, okay, the progressives who disagreed with their notion of what the priorities were at that particular point in time. If a Medicare for all bill had been introduced on the first day of the new Congress, there was no way you would have gotten as many people voting for it as you will get at the height of the Medicare for all campaign that Jayapal and all these other groups, okay, are running. I don't know whether that's going to be a successful vote, okay, for Medicare for all. But it will show much more clearly who's for us and who's against us than would a bill that had come to the floor very quickly, okay, by a Nancy Pelosi who wanted to get rid quickly of a commitment she made under duress in order to get into the speakership. That would not have been a true test of support for Medicare for all. So, the social media campaigns on Twitter certainly can help the right campaign at the right moment with priorities working together with grassroots campaigns and congressional campaigns. General strikes and street protests can surely help, but again, in tandem, as part of a larger whole. That's what we have to focus on, putting the larger whole together, putting the overwhelming national movement together, putting together a movement of movements to get through both Medicare for all and all the other things we need. That's going to take intelligence on our part. It's going to include a sense of the priorities, and it's going to include a willingness to play hardball when the time comes, but not to play hardball at the wrong time, with inadequate planning, with something that is not thought through for a limited goal and a limited gain. So, I hope you'll take that all under advisement. I hope you all, okay, will recognize that this has been about forcing the vote and passing Medicare for all, and what it's going to take, okay, for us to do that. So, but thank you all for being here, and thank you all for staying. And I'm going to go back to your comments and do the usual handling of comments. And Go Start says, hello, Joe. Hello, Go Start. I do know who you are, but I'm not going to give it away. Nikki King says, hiya, Joe. Bonnie says, hi, everyone. Gina Marie says, hi. Susan Eldridge says, hello. Hello, Susan. And Kay says, love Jayapal. Jayapal's pretty formidable. She ain't perfect, but she's pretty formidable. Even says, why can't progressive insist that funds be earmarked for progressive policies their constituents have the votes for? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but Evelina insists that funds be earmarked for progressive policies. The way Congress works, funds are appropriated. They are appropriated for spending bills. That's how they, are earmarked. In other words, what's earmarked is the appropriations. They are for various things specified in the law. Then it's up to the Treasury and the Federal Reserve to work together to get the funds put in the Treasury spending account that are necessary to do the spending that Congress has appropriated, as I've explained time after time after time. Kay says, good question, Evelina. Evelina smiles. Evelina says, a general strike is close to impossible, but in good weather, we can see more support for Medicare for all and the real Green New Deal on the street. No? Yes, but maybe a general strike is not close to impossible. There have been general strikes in France. There have been general strikes in other countries. There's good weather coming, and there's the pandemic hopefully starting to go. And maybe by August and September, it will be possible to have general strikes. I don't know. But I know some people are for those, and they're interested in planning those, and they are waiting to join movements and to use them as tools for movements. Deborah says, if only there were sufficient votes to override President Puff of Smoke's veto. There won't be, but I tell you, if Biden gets that Medicare for all on his desk, he is going to pass it. He is going to pass it with 87, 88% of Democrats in favor of it. He's going to pass it, or he's going to lose the election in 2024. It's that simple. His threat to refuse to sign it, to veto it, if it comes onto his desk, that will go against a solid Democratic Party for that bill in both houses of Congress. Because the only way that bill is going to pass is if there are 50 Democratic senators for it in Congress. Then the vice president will have to break the tie by going over to the Republican side. She's not going to do that. Biden is just going to fold. He's not even going to veto it. He's not even going to get the chance to veto it because he's just not going to stop Harris from voting for it, which she will do. If there are 50 Democratic votes in the Senate for it, she's going to vote for it unless he tells her not to. If he tells her not to, he's dead for 2024. And if she's going to run, she's dead for 2024. And if we pass something in 2021 or 2022, okay, and then he kills it in 2022, he's guaranteeing the ruination of his presidency. Guaranteeing it right then and there. Okay, Dia Swift says, greetings. No, Biden will oppose it. He'll claim he's going to veto it. He'll oppose it. He'll use every machination he can to kill it in the Senate, okay, or in the House. But if he fails, he's going to sign it. I guarantee that. Evelyn says, I don't think he'll veto if there's not support, though. No. Kay says, M for all would mean freedom for all who want or need to move to get a job, too. And freedom for all who want to start a business, too. I mean, what do you think has been killing entrepreneurship in this country? People don't want to start businesses because they can't get health care, or it would cost too much to get health care. Old Gringo says, hello, late but here. Yes, Troy, I know. And Evelina says, yep, Kay, you're right. Terry says, hey, Jeffrey, don't worry about impeached liar. The bunny rabbit just got rolled, turned into a Ford, found on the road dead. What's this? I have more compassion for eggs than Trump, Obama, or Clinton. Most people know what crooks you are. Our circle of friends are far more wealthy than any of those past presidents. Our measuring stick for wealth is how much love and respect we have for each other, and on a mission to make a lot of things right. Makes for our worth to be worlds above living in the dark side. Terry Cook said that. And the Swift said, I've noticed live streaming interruptions are significantly reduced here on YouTube. On Facebook, it's almost every few minutes. Facebook is probably using more memory than it should be. Kay says, Span in Ohio backs it. Deborah Wilson said, there is no what he wants or thinks. The fix is in, he's not there. Dia Swift says, if the U.S. government wants to maintain the vital resource of labor, they better pass Medicare for all. Kay says, Single Payer Action Network, SPAN. Dia Swift said, because COVID, especially the B117, is killing and sickening the younger, healthier workforce. Maybe, but when you get the vaccines into them, Dia, supposedly Johnson & Johnson is completely effective for severe illness, hospitalization, and death with respect to B117. Pfizer is claiming it is definitely effective, okay, against the B117 variant for that. And Kay says, United Health was worthless for me. Deborah says, President says, just go get Cobra. Deborah says, cost a bloody fortune. Kay says, they said they paid for Cobra, but it would have been way cheaper to go Medicare for all. Yeah. They paid for Cobra. They paid money into the more of the profitable health insurance companies. Deborah says, Kay, there are still premiums, deductibles, and copays. There sure are, but not with Medicare for all. Kay says, I wasn't sure how that worked, but thank you for the info, Deborah. I think they're covering the premiums under Cobra, but there is still the deductibles and copays. Deborah Wilson says status quo Joe. Deborah says Kay, Clark Ryan, follow Fiorella, Isabel of Convo Couch. She checked it out. Deborah says the Affordable Care Act is anything but. Yeah, I know. Kay says, I agree. Kay says, I'm on expanded Medicaid in Ohio, but the rules and regulations are a huge pain in the ass. And Dia says, Washington State has cases of Ebola. Oh, my God. Evelina says, all that bureaucracy is there to keep people from obtaining the benefits they need. Ironic, isn't it? K. Clark Ryan says, I've been on Beatty, Ryan, and Brown in Ohio. Kay says, yes, it is. Evelina. And Evelina says, yeah, bureaucracy. I think I spelled that right this time. I think you did too. Dia says, got my J&J vaccine 2 days ago. No sore arm, low-grade fever, and pressure headache, but nothing drastic. And I slept so good for 3 days. Okay, remember, it's not going to be completely effective for some time. I think it takes but 3 weeks to get the efficacy of 66% and the protection against severe illness and death. So be careful. Continue to be careful, Dia. Deborah Wilson says, K. Clark Ryan, I'm glad I live in Mexico. I'm also a veteran. So that's a good backup when I'm in the United States. The VA is wonderful. I wish all Americans could have government-provided health care. Yeah, I mean, I wish we had a national health service. But the VA is the U.S. version of the National Health Service. It was just never extended to the rest of the population. Evelina says, laugh out loud, but maybe not. Deborah says, Evelina, but Joe will help you not. Kay says, Deborah, we're in Mexico. I'd love to leave this country. Can I keep my piddling SS money there? Yes. Yes, you can. You can receive your SS check at a corresponding bank, okay, in another country. It's done by people all the time who have migrated to Thailand and who live in Thailand and are living on Social Security there. But Deborah Wilson, is there a veterans for peace movement there? And Alana says, just got back from food shopping. Happy Saturday. Evelina says, to move. Evelina says, move, as opposed to more. Kay says, wish I could, Evelina. Dia says, happy Saturday, Lana. Evelina says, she meant to but say movement. Deborah says, Kate Clark Ryan, you can. My 75-year-old husband lives on it. Evelina says, in Mexico. Dia says, Lana, did you find any good deals? Evelina says, but Deborah Wilson, laugh out loud. But my question was meant for you, Deborah. Deborah says, Evelina, not sure, but we're very active with Free Julian Assange. Kay says, where in Mexico? Is it peaceful there, Deborah? Kay Clark Ryan says, Deborah, where in Mazatlan? It's heavenly. Joy Burgess Ramsey says, hi, Joy. I want to get more involved now that our house is finished, except for cleaning and decorating. It's about time the Americans have Medicare for all. We're the richest country in the world, though, so every other country except us already have it. Some of them have national health services. If that doesn't make you angry, take your pulse. We must fight the lobbyists and so many to win. But when we will, I'll have to check that out. Thank you, Deborah. Evelyn, it says, seems there are few career politicians with conviction. Fortunately, there are some. Joy says, does Durbin and Duckworth check out okay? If not, I'll campaign against them. I think Duckworth is questionable. I think if Durbin were given half a chance, he would easily come over to the progressive side. I mean, I don't think that he's a rabid kind of neoliberal um, at all. I think he's one of those who will go where the party goes. If the party goes left, he will go. Joy says, I know that Representative Boat doesn't. People in Southern Illinois got to wake up. Who was Representative Boat? I haven't heard of he or she. And Joy says, Duckworth, Bost, question mark. Joy says, Dr. Firestone does such a great job. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joy. And I shared the YouTube, of Jayapal when she introduced the Medicare for All bill. Lana says, no, didn't have time, was trying to cover the bases, get food for tomorrow, and get out. Dee says, gotcha, Lana. Kay says, that Michigan should have elected El Sayed for governor. Shake my head. They're coming apart with new virus cases now. Yeah, they should have done it, but I hate to think, I don't know. It was for Whitmer, she had a couple of close calls with the right-wing crazies there. But for all the hate they showed her, those right-wing crazies would have gone absolutely ape, if El Sayed had become the governor of Michigan. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? They probably would have orchestrated an attack on the Capitol, an armed attack on the Capitol, almost immediately. Still, I wish that he had won and had a chance to handle them. I have a feeling we would have seen something. Thea Swift says, does that nurse's outfit know MNT? And I wonder if it would further the cause. Absolutely, they do. The NNU has been working with our people for some time. And I put in healthcarenow.org and pnhp.org. Evelina says, I still follow him. But me too, Evelina. Talking about the same one who wanted to run to unseat Nancy Pelosi. No, El Sayed is not in Congress. No, El Sayed is not in Congress. He was running for governor of Michigan. Shahed Buttar was running to replace Nancy Pelosi. Yes, Kay, you spelled his name correctly. Why does the left and the party have to lose except their careers? Who will vote for them to remain if they don't get aggressive? I don't know. I think they have to be more aggressive in order to get people to vote for them. I mean, they were sent to Congress to be aggressive. Now, they're showing aggressiveness in introducing legislation, which is good legislation, in making public statements and oversight and questioning, but they're not using their power to hold bills hostage. That is what they have to do. That is the power they have in the House. The House is organized to be oligarchical and hierarchical, as is the Senate. But when the margins in the House are slim, the oligarchy there is weak then. That's the time when the progressives have to insist on their priorities, and they have not been doing it. Kay says, I'm so sick of the corruption in both parties in this country, me too. But I don't think that the latest progressive wave in the House, I do not think they are corrupt. I'm sorry, I reject that particular narrative. I don't think that's what is going on. They're trying to find a way through while still delivering for their constituents. And it isn't easy. They need more experience in Congress. They're getting it now. They've got to discover their own power by learning that they can hold bills hostage and get what they want, at least part of what they want, that way. Evelyn says, in past bills, they were elected to pass. But me too, she says. Ha, yeah. Who cares if they find the deficit? That she says, fun. Who cares? Yeah. Dr. J, why can't you be an advisor to the squad? I think the title squadamentarian fits you. You got this, squadamentarian. I don't know if the squad is in a position to appoint, a squadamentarian. But I doubt the squad even knows my name. Even though I did send a copy of my book, to Rashida when she came out with the Automatic Booster Communities Act. Kay says, the U.S. government refuses to recognize MMT. I don't know what you mean by that, Kay. In other words, people in the government, people in the Congress know some MMT now. There are a number of members of Congress who know about MMT, including Rashida, AOC, Presley, Ilhan, Jamal Bowman, probably Mondaire Jones by now, Cori Bush. They're certainly conversant with a certain amount of it, some of the basics. So parts of the government, because part of the Congress, parts of the government, are conversant, with MMT. Oh, also Jayapal knows MMT, for sure. I mean, you can see it in her statements sometimes. Evelyn says, I still can't believe the measly $15 an hour minimum wage was included from the bill. It wasn't even going to be $15 an hour until 2025. Evelyn says, but maybe they do need a commercial. To laugh out loud. Kay says, Biden still hasn't fired Rump's heads of SSA yet. Shake my head. That was the only reason I voted for him. Ilana says, Dia, I like it. Dia says, thank you, lovely Lana. Evelyn says, they still don't acknowledge fair status quo economic measures even. Yeah, that's true. Dia says, speaking of crying Boner, he's going ham in his book. I read a few lines here and there in headlines. Dia says, vacate the chair sounds like the opposite, of musical chairs. Oh, by the way, when he was hit, with vacate the chair, when he was hit with it, he defeated vacate the chair. But it embarrassed him so much, because when there was a vacate the chair motion, against him, the rules were already in place, to protect him. So all he did was to table the motion. It did not actually bother him from a technical standpoint. He had control of the situation. But 2 months later, he got so sick of sitting on top of the unruly Freedom Caucus that he decided he much preferred just spending full time on the golf course, and he resigned as the speaker and left the field to Paul Ryan. That's how Paul Ryan became the chair for the speaker. And Lana says, is this our hashtag? Is this our hashtag? Hashtag vacate the chair along with force the vote for Medicare for all. In the right circumstances, under the right conditions, with the right coordination with the larger movement, those may turn out to be the hashtags. They could well turn out to be the hashtags. We got to get rid of that leadership, though, because they will stand in the way, okay, of Medicare for all until the cows come home. Even if Nancy Pelosi herself ends up voting for Medicare for all, she will send out Jim Clyburn and Steny Hoyer to join a block of other conservatives to vote against it so it doesn't pass by majority vote. Kay says, if people are freed up to go work where they need or want to, there will be more taxes paid too. Yeah, you bet. They could be free to go work on the job guarantee program somewhere they like better than where they live now, or they could stay where they are now if they like that better. Dia says, good suggested hashing addendum, Lana. Evelina says, biding time, Biden is in no hurry. He's got to be in a hurry because not only is he getting old, he may lose control of the Senate anytime. Go start set overtime. Evelina, that isn't helping seniors at all. He will not get my vote again. Democrats and so-called progressives have the neoliberal ADD and can't stay on track long enough to hold the bill hostage. Kay says, dear Joe Biden, we seniors helped out you in office. Fire Rump's SSA head, so we will not help you again. And Karen, sorry, scroll down too fast. And Karen, Love My Life Harris said, they're working on that now. Kay says, I hope so. Not sure what they're working on now, Karen, but you can sort of clarify that. Kay says, I hope so. Johnny Garza says, what incentive those in Congress have to vote on behalf of the people when they face enormous challenges from wealthy campaign contributors? And hello, Joe, and everyone who are regulars. Well, Johnny Garza, the only incentive they can possibly have, I suppose, is to keep their seats, okay, in Congress. Here's a question, Joe. But do you know of any time in history where money didn't influence our representatives in such a bad way? Yeah, I do. During the New Deal period, during the Second World War period, during the post-war period, but during the 1950s, but during the 1960s, when the money started becoming really, really, really important, where it was starting to overturn everything else, was in the 1980s, really. That's where it really, really took hold. It was influential before. It always had some influence. Okay, it was dominating things during the 1920s. It was dominating things in the 1890s. It lost some control during the 1900s. Okay, but not enough. But starting with the 1930s, it lost a lot of control and started getting it back only through the fourth decade after it had lost control. So yes, I do know of a time in history where money was nowhere near as important as it is now, okay, in American politics. Lana says, I thank you very much for giving this presentation. I missed the first hour or so, so I'll have to go back, okay, and listen again. I invited and shared all over. Okay, a little disappointed, not more people here. I think there was fairly good attendance for this, and people stayed for some time. And when I finished my presentation, there was still 15 people here, so that was good. With respect to the first hour was mostly on the history of the Twitter struggle, okay, the background. And talking about that, I think you'd be very, very interested in what I had to say about that, Lana, because I've really gained considerable perspective on it. Lana says, thank you very much. Not thank you. Johnny says, that would be me as far as the general strike is concerned, scheduled for May 15th, 2022. Are you going to organize a general strike for May 15th, 2022? We might need one before then. Lana says, Biden wouldn't have the GD goal not to pass Medicare for all if it gets through the House and Senate. It would be political suicide. Yeah, that's what I think too. Barbara says, Biden won't do it. Dia says, hell, Biden might need Medicare for all himself, falling on the airplane steps and all. Laugh out loud. He has National Health Service basically now. I mean, he gets taken care of for free, has the best care in the country. Susan says, good night. Good night, Susan. Joy Burgess Ramsey says, we have a United Healthcare, but I rather have a regular Medicare. My husband's employer, state of Illinois, put all teachers on a United Healthcare. No choice or pay for your own. Kay says a United Healthcare is useless. Joy says so far it pays for doctor trips and prescriptions, but I haven't been admitted to a hospital yet. Johnny says good night. Joy says he's from Murfreesboro, Representative Bost. B-O-S-T, Illinois. Thank you, Joy. Okay, I know of a Representative Bost. I just didn't know of a representative. I'm not sure what you called him before, but anyway, Kay says Congress needs Nina. Joy says, I love Katie Porter with the Irish accent. I heard the House penalized her for something. Yeah, they took her off the Finance Committee. I'm sorry, the Financial Services Committee. And she kind of made a mistake and put as her first choice the Oversight Committee because she wanted to be on the Oversight Committee. So Maxine Waters took that opportunity to kick her out of the Financial Services Committee because the banks wanted her out of the Financial Services Committee. So Lana says another hashtag hold the bill hostage. And so Dolores says, thank you and good night all. Thank you, Dolores. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being here and supporting so well. And Joy says, $15, not enough, more like 24 hours right now, Reagan. Yeah, we should be beginning to campaign for $24 an hour right now. In fact, we should start even before we get to $15 an hour. We should start talking $24 an hour right now. Joy says Reagan. Johnny Garza said, so it was in the beginning of the neoliberal age, so our challenge is an ideology. If we defeat that ideology, we win, correct? No, we got to defeat, the money is supporting the ideology. So we got to defeat both the ideology and the money at the same time. They're reinforcing each other. We have to beat the money with people power. And we have to pass bills prohibiting the contributions as soon as we have a chance. We could do so now. If we got rid of the filibuster and everybody acted with the 51 votes and the small majority in the House, they could pass bills tomorrow with the exceptions clause prohibiting the funding from the neoliberal rich and prohibiting the review of those laws by the Supreme Court using Article 3, Section 2. Even in the exceptions clause of the Constitution, but denying jurisdiction for the Supreme Court to review those campaign finance laws. If they can't review them, they can't overturn them. Evelyn says, with Reagan in the 80s, I remember that awful man. Well, it wasn't simply Reagan. It was also just the whole system of organized money getting organized. I think Reagan was the beneficiary of that. To some degree, he was an organizer of it, but far from the head, of the organization movement. Evelina, but Reagan was the worst, says Joy. And Dia says, great segment tonight. Thank you and have a pleasant night. Thank you for coming, Dia. Kay says, greed is a good era under Reagan. And Joy says, thank you, Joe. Thank you for coming, Joy. It's good to see you. Evelina says, I was in my early teens. Kay says, Evelina, I remember it all too well. So do I. And Johnny says, I meant to say goodnight to Dolores. I got a few more minutes left. Evelyn says, I remember when he forced the air traffic controllers. So do I. That was terrible. When he fired the air traffic controllers, right? And Lana says, $24 in 24. That's a good slogan. 24 hours in 24. So Joy says, the Powell memo, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, yeah, that came out in the 70s, and it was the start of it. But it took them a while to get going, and the money did not really have control. But Jimmy Carter blew that election of 1980. It was not the money that actually defeated him. If he had been a better president on the economics, he would have won a second term, and it would have been much better for the country because he was going very, very aggressive on alternative sources of power and the environment. In his second term, he would have been even more aggressive on those things. We lost so much ground on the environment and the climate, but by electing Reagan. Joy Burgess says, great slogan. Joy Ramsey, I should say. But Joy Burgess Ramsey. Johnny Garza says, really informative tonight, Joe. Article 3, Section 2. I learned here. Yeah, the exceptions clause is just a small phrase, but it allows the Congress to set the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. It has never been used in modern times. I think it was used earlier, but very sparingly. But that is the key to breaking the power of the Supreme Court, of the conservative Supreme Court. Prevent them from actually reviewing certain bills. Okay, folks, I've caught up. I'm going to say good night. Thank you for coming. And Joy says 24 and 24. Whoever thought of it? So in Article 5, aligning with Article 3 would do it right. All you need is the current Constitution with Article 3, Section 2. Okay, if you have an Article 5 convention, I don't think the time is right for that yet. But if you had it, then you could just prohibit the funding in the Constitution. Lana says good night. Good night, Lana. And good night, all. I am ending.
Happy Easter.
And we love you too, Kay. Happy Easter, everybody, by the way. Easter Sunday is tomorrow. Have a great day. And we'll have a great day too, though we don't celebrate Easter. But we will have a great day for sure, anyway.